Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anupama, Professor at Department of Economics, Punjabi University, Patiala. I am going to talk about the module Urban Households and Gender from Population, Urbanization and Poverty. So students, we are going to discuss about the gender differences in access to various urban services as well as the distribution of urban employment and other sources of economic as well as social power. This module aims to throw light on the importance of gender dimension in analyzing the urban households. The relationship between gender and urban prosperity. Age and sex composition of urban households, gendered division of work in urban households, the gender differences in attainment of education status, access to physical assets among males and females, gender differences in sources of power, state action in adopting gender progressive policies. Household is one of the most important institutions in social life. It is a basic unit of society where individuals both cooperate and compete for the resources. It is also a primary place in which individuals confront and reproduce societal norms, values, power, and the privilege. Gender norms expressed within the households are reinforced and reflected in larger institutions of society. Gender relations are not confined to the domestic arena, although households constitute an important institutional site on which the gender relations are played out, but are made, remade, and contested in a range of institutional arenas in both the rural and urban areas. The urban areas are generally considered to be less traditional in their approach, and it is expected that the cultural blocks would be relatively less tight in the urban areas, leading to relatively more independence to the woman. Ideally, it is expected that as urbanization would take place, the cultural shackles they would lose their control and women have a wider economic, social and political space. Urbanization is also associated with gender-related transformations, such as greater engagement of women in paid employment, linked with a wide range of opportunities as compared to the rural areas. This in turn has demographic implications, including a decline in fertility levels, often higher opportunities. This in turn has demographic implications, including a decline in fertility levels, often higher proportions of women in overall urban population, and a concentration of woman-headed households in urban centers. However, just as prosperity is not an inevitable outcome of urbanization, nor is gender equality. There is a considerable evidence to suggest that barriers to women's empowerment remain widespread in urban environments. Differences in roles played by men and women can be equally found in urban households. The urban areas may be showing lesser inequalities as compared to the rural ones, but still they are not the places where perfect gender equality prevails. We can easily find adverse sex ratios, preference for male child, lesser investment by households in education and health of the woman, and several other glimpses of gender inequality in urban areas. Therefore, it would be interesting to look at the urban households from the gender dimension. Now the big question is why gender dimension is important. There are several reasons which induce any analysis to look at the urban households from the gender angle. Firstly, the urban populations are now driving towards feminization of the sex ratio. That is, greater number of females are now joining the incremental population than males. Secondly, the number of female-headed households is now increasing in the urban areas. Although the urban labor force is also being feminized, but the benefits of urban growth are not being shared equally among the sexes. And under poor economic conditions, the women suffer more than the men. The women also have unequal access to health, education, asset ownership, experiences of violence, and ability to exercise their rights. Therefore, in order to address the issues of urban prosperity and inclusiveness of the growth of urban areas, it is important to look at the points from where the discrimination erupts or is accentuated. For this purpose, Chant has given a conceptual framework for understanding the urban prosperity and gender relations in households as well as the economy. This framework is given in Figure 1. The figure shows that equity or inequity in share of men and women in urban growth actually interacts with several mutually reinforcing factors. Especially important in relation to the notion of gender disparities are the pervasive inequalities that exist between women and men in relation to their access to resources, power, opportunities, and freedom of movement. These revolve around the following: gender and urban demographics, gender division of labor in the urban economy, gender disparities in human capital, gender gaps in physical and financial capital assets, gender disparities in space, mobility, and connectivity, and gender disparities in power and rights. As identified in Figure 1, all the elements intersect in complex ways. Now we will discuss each of these aspects one by one. The first important aspect is age and sex composition of urban households. Age and sex composition of the population in urban areas is an important demographic feature which provides the basis for understanding any type of gender discrimination in the economy. Here, an attempt has been made to show the population pyramid of 3 countries at different income levels. These are USA, China, and Bangladesh. Before analyzing these pyramids, we should know here that in USA, more of the women are found than men, while in China and Bangladesh, the number of women is less than that of the men. The population pyramids of the 3 countries show a different picture. In USA, the age-wise distribution shows that the percentage of female population is lower than that of the males up to 50 years of age, while in higher age group, the share of males is lower than that of the females. This indicates higher life expectancy among females than males. In China, a majority of the population lies in the age group between 15 to 59 years. That is the productive population. Due to this type of composition of population, this country is known to have a demographic dividend. The gender composition shows that the share of females is higher than males in the age groups between 20 to 40 years and then more than 55 years. Finally, in Bangladesh, the share of women is higher than that of the men only in the age group 20 to 40 years. While in other age groups, that is below 20 years and more than 40 years, the proportion of female population is lower than that of the males. This indicates lower birth rates and life expectancy rates among females than males. Lower life expectancy among females than males in Bangladesh is a serious issue as women in general live longer than men, and a lower life expectancy among women in urban areas is a tendency against the normal or natural trends. A range of demographic factors play an important part in contextualizing women's lives within urban environments. A key process is the relationship between the demographic transition and urbanization, of which an important aspect is lower fertility levels in cities. Fertility, understood in terms of childbearing, is dependent of many factual and societal circumstances, such as cultural traditions, education, and the overall level of development of the society and community. The most commonly used measure of fertility is the total fertility rate, that is, the number of children that a woman would have over her childbearing years, if at each age she experienced the age-specific fertility rate. Indeed, there are generally differences in the level of fertility rates in urban areas compared to the rural areas of a country, as illustrated in Figure 3. This is mainly due to the relatively easy access of women in more modern urban settings to a range of services such as education, family planning, and healthcare, as well as their exposure to a different set of cultural and societal values. The figure shows that it is only in Maldives that the urban fertility rate is higher than that registered by its rural areas. Similarly, vast rural-urban differences can be noticed in Morocco, Bhutan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Israel, Namibia, Pakistan, and Swaziland. Now, let us discuss about gender division of work in urban households. Women's place in society is largely determined by the gender roles played in the household. In most of the developing economies, the family life rests solidly on shoulders of women. Preparing family meals, maintaining hygiene, caring for the family members, and a myriad of other chores related to children consume a good part of the day for women in the world. While men are increasingly getting involved in the daily functioning of the families, it is still predominantly women's responsibility. This can be assessed from the time use surveys of male and female members in a family. The time use surveys have proven to be important tools for answering many crucial questions related to the differences in status of women and men. Time use surveys encompass a number of areas including paid and unpaid work, division of labor within the families, which further have an influence upon female workforce participation, their social connectedness, and their civic participation, among many others. Figure 4 illustrates the difference in paid and unpaid work performed by men and women in a family. Here, the unpaid work includes housework, caring for family members. The figure shows that the difference in time spent on the paid as well as unpaid work by men and women is lower in case of developed countries such as USA, Germany, and Canada as compared to the developing economies like Pakistan, South Africa, and China. However, in each case, women spend more time on unpaid work while men spend it more on paid work. In most of the developing economies, apart from household chores and care of young and elderly, women also have to spend a considerable proportion of their daytime in fetching water and collection of fuel. Lack of access to drinking water on the premises or within a short distance continues to affect the lives of women. Lack of access to drinking water on the premises or within a short distance continues to affect the lives of women and men in the less developed regions. When water is not available on the premises, women are more often responsible for water collection than men are. This is the case in both rural and urban areas, in majority of the sub-Saharan African countries, and in rural areas of some Asian countries. On average, an adult woman is the person usually carrying home the water in 63% of rural households and 29% of urban households in sub-Saharan Africa. In comparison, an adult man has this responsibility in 11% of rural households and 10% of urban households. In rural areas in Asia, women are the ones fetching the water in 30% of the households and men in 13%. In contrast, in rural and urban areas in Latin America and the Caribbean, the burden falls more often on men. Similarly, the girls under 15 years are also more likely than boys of the same age to be in charge of water collection. Women are the most burdened not only because they are usually the ones in charge of water collection, but also because more time is needed for them to bring water home. More than one trip per day may be needed to cover all the household needs, and this limits the amount of time that women can spend on other activities such as income earning, education, or leisure. This again explains why the participation of women is lower in case of paid work as compared to the men. Therefore, the work done by women has low economic value, translating into lower social status for the woman vis-a-vis men. On the other hand, men are considered to be the breadwinners and the main productive force of the society. The differences in attitude about men and women often leads to low investment in human capital of women in most of the developing societies. We can notice the gender differences in education status. In many areas of the world, educating girl is perceived to be less important than educating boys. Furthermore, while significant progress has been made in reducing the gender gap in primary school enrollment, a large gap remains between rural and urban areas, and greater number of girls remain out of school than boys. Household data from 42 countries in Figure 6 show that rural children are twice as likely to be out of school as children living in urban areas. The data also shows that the rural-urban gap is slightly wider for girls than for boys. But the biggest obstacle to education seems to be poverty. Girls in the poorest 20% of households have the least chance of getting any education. They are 3.5 times more likely to be out of school than the girls in the richest households, and 4 times more likely to be out of school as boys in the richest households. If we further extend our analysis to attainment of education at primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, the gender divisions are more visible. Though the world is close to reaching the target of achieving gender parity in case of primary education, in case of secondary and tertiary education, several countries in the developing region have huge gaps to reach the targeted parity to be achieved by 2015 as guided by the Millennium Development Goals. Main lagging regions are Sub-Saharan Africa, Western Asia, Southern Asia, and Oceania. The gender gap in tertiary education in these countries is even wider and farther away from the targeted level. Interestingly, in Southeastern Asia, Latin America, and Caribbean, more of the females are enrolled in tertiary education as compared to the males. But still, the developing region is 3 percentage points away from the targeted gender parity index of 100. The South Asian region has been found to be the worst performer in attaining gender parity in education at each level. In 2008, in South Asia, the gender parity index had a value of 96 in case of primary education. This value was 87 in secondary education and merely 65 in tertiary education against a target of 100 for perfect gender equality. Another important aspect is to discuss the access to physical assets and its gender dimension. Women's individual control over resources is considered important not only because of the fairness of equal access to resources, but also because of the resulting economic autonomy of women and their increased bargaining power within the household, and how these may translate into more egalitarian intra-household relations. In most countries in Africa and about half the countries in Asia, women are disadvantaged by statutory and customary laws in their access to land ownership and other types of property. Elements of gender inequality with regard to inheritance rights are identified in 45 out of 48 African countries reviewed and in 25 out of 42 Asian ones. With regard to entitlements to ownership of land, gender inequality was identified in 43 African countries and 21 Asian countries. Better conditions were observed for Latin America and the Caribbean and for Eastern Europe. In urban areas, 21% of the house and residential titles are in names of women. 60% are in names of men and 18% are joint titles. In rural areas, 8% of the farm and forest land titles are in the name of women, 87% are in the name of men, and 5% are the joint titles. The case of Vietnam is equally valid for many of the developing countries. Lack of data on rural-urban breakup and on male-female differences in ownership of the assets often hinders many rational analysis. Many a times, the ownership of property is in hands of the male head, whose fruits are equally enjoyed by all members of the family in terms of the standard of living of the household. Therefore, for clearer lines of distinction regarding the ownership of property between man and woman, most of the analysis depend upon the ownership of land and other assets by head of the households. It is generally found that the productive assets and other property owned by the female-headed households is much lower than the male-headed households, which is the main cause of greater incidence of poverty among the female-headed households as compared to the male-headed households. Let us discuss about the gender differences in sources of power. A final critical component of conceptualizing the interrelationship between gender and urban prosperity relates to gender differences in power and rights. These differences exist across scales, from the personal through household, community, and city to the national level. They are also mediated by informal and formal mechanisms. However, the big question is, what gives women power? A survey of 2,000 women across 19 countries by the team of World Development Report 2012 indicates that women depend upon a combination of factors to feel empowered. These include generating and managing income, followed closely by acquiring an education, and then by personal traits and access to social networks. This can be observed from figure 9. It is also clear that no single factor can explain changes in environment. Any one factor may be present, many women with different levels of power, and may even determine gains or losses in power, depending on other factors operating on women's lives. The figure shows that the pathways for men and women are entirely different. Female pathways to greater empowerment include a broader range of factors, largely dependent on the ability to make decisions, be free of violence, and participate in social networks. Male pathways are much narrower and dominated by the economy and the existence of and access to jobs. For women, the personal, family-based, psychological, and social factors have much greater influence than the men, who give greater importance to occupational and economic change, and education and training. Though the lack of access to various financial, physical, social, and human capital assets concerns both men and women, it is likely to affect women more because of their relatively lower literacy, lower incomes, lower mobility, and less extended social networks. The isolation of the women from main centers of economic, social, and political activity also increases their possibilities of suppression. The inequitable power relations are often reflected in general incidents of gender-based violence in households. More worrisome is the fact that women hardly raise any voice or seek any help against such suppressions. This can be observed from figure 9. The figure shows that less than 8% of women in urban areas and 16% in rural areas seek for any help against the incidents of domestic violence against them. There can be a number of reasons behind that. Social norms for gender roles that often make women responsible for care and housework do not allow them the time to pursue legal services, especially when they must travel long distances to access them. Norms for acceptable behavior and safety can also constrain women's ability and their ability to access justice services. Another gender-specific factor is social stigma and psychological trauma often involved in bringing claims. Women are often reluctant to pursue justice where outcomes are not predictable, where legal institutions are gender-biased, and where legal actors themselves victimize complainants, resulting in a double victimization. Thus, the main reason given for not seeking services were strong social norms, unsympathetic to women's claim, and a lack of trust in the services. So, students, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. Linked with the importance of addressing gender disparities in power and rights identified in figure 1, gender equity is central to ensuring the equal distribution of the benefits of prosperity in cities in general and women's empowerment in particular. For this, it is essential that the rights of women should be adequately protected and they should have full access to the productive and other material resources in cities. While collective action and social movement often catalyze state action, governments typically initiate and promote policies that reduce or eliminate gender inequalities directly. A first step in bringing gender into policy process is to understand the gender dimension of policy design and enforcement. A gender lens should thus be a feature in all state agencies. Governments can also set up specialized agencies, often termed gender machineries, specifically to promote women's rights. The government policies put a fuel to the machineries of markets, formal and informal institutions, which further regulate the gender-based power equation in the households. As a result, the access of men and women to economic opportunities and endowments are determined, which further influence the growth patterns and the process goes on. This discussion brings a clear message that if the government policies do not initiate the process of change, old age cultural practices remain unaltered, and the gender-based discrimination is visible in households, markets, and society as a whole. That's all with today's lecture. I hope you must have enjoyed this lecture. Thank you.